No, welcome everybody to another. This is a bit of an impromptu episode of Spartan Theology, but I've been working on this essay review for a little while, and I kept getting distracted. But I finally finished it up today, and wanted to jump on to do it. I'm going to be talking about Matthew Thiessen's article, "Did Jesus Plan to Start a New Religion?" And yeah, I'm really excited. It was really good, like pretty short, easy to read article, but it hit on some really good topics, and it really, yeah, I don't have it right next to me, it's in the other room, but it goes along well with his book Jesus and the Forces of Death. So if you've seen that around or you've read it, it's a really good book. I'm like halfway through it, so I haven't read the whole thing, but this article kind of talks about some of the same things. I'm assuming maybe he wrote the article before the book or something, because it doesn't mention the book. So, yeah, I meant to look into that, but I didn't. But whatever. So, before we get started with the actual essay review, I wanted to talk about a couple things. Yeah, I did a stream last night with Andrew Abernathy, or not last night, but Monday night. Jeez, I'm losing track of days. Yeah, Monday night with Andrew Abernathy. If you haven't seen that, definitely check it out. We talked about God's Messiah in the Old Testament, his book that he wrote, and it was a really, really good conversation. I definitely recommend checking it out if you haven't seen it. And yeah, we talked about some good stuff. I got a lot of audience questions, which I thought was really cool. I tried to ask some beforehand. I got to some that were in the chat, and I really enjoyed that. So going forward, best place is to follow me on Twitter. I'm going to start asking for questions on Twitter, and kind of trying to engage more with people beforehand on whatever topic I plan to be talking about with whoever I'm planning to interview. But yeah, just trying to engage more with what questions people are actually asking. But yes, so with that, I just want to mention the few live streams I have planned. We have Chris Tilling on July 8th. I'm going to be doing that one with John from Apocalypse Here and Samuel Watkinson, who Samuel actually hasn't been on my channel. He's been on John's channel, and he was on John's channel like 3 times now, because last night we did a live stream. But like 2 official times, and the one I was on there with him, and me and him are pretty good friends. So, super excited. So, it'll be me, John, and Samuel talking to Chris Tilling on the 8th. And then on July 21st, I'm having Chris Keith on to talk about like historicity of the Gospels, some historical Jesus stuff, and his sort of social memory theory. I'm not super, super familiar. I've been looking into it more and more, but I've watched a few of his interviews and read a little bit of his work in preparation, and he's super, super interesting. So I'm really excited for that. And then last one I have planned is August 2nd. I'm having Dr. Maggie Bryson on to talk about the Exodus. So she's a Egyptologist, and basically through email we've been talking. She's going to talk about why the narrative as described in the Bible more than likely didn't happen. It just wouldn't necessarily make sense with what was kind of going on in Egypt at the time. So I'm really, really excited. But she's a Christian, so I don't want to. She's not like trying to debunk the Bible or whatever. Which, people are crazy. I think, but whatever. I'm really excited to talk to her. But with that, right before we get started, I just want to say, if you're not subscribed, please subscribe to the channel. And if you are subscribed, then hit the like button and leave a comment. Leaving a comment on the video really, really helps. So even if it's just, I like the video, just say something. It definitely helps the video get out there. But I just want to say we've been growing and growing with subscribers, and it's super exciting. So thank you to everyone who's subscribed recently. And let's kind of get this, not my YouTube, but we'll get this presentation pulled up. I kind of put together. So the essay we're going to be talking about today is Matthew Thiessen's article, Did Jesus Plan to Start a New Religion? So the introduction, he starts out by laying out a few quotes that kind of set the stage for where we're at with this whole thing and like why this question is important and things along those lines. So you can see he quotes Martin Luther here at the top. And Martin Luther is having one of his lectures on the book of Jonah, right? Book of Jonah. And he talks about when Jonah's under the plant for shade, and there's like that worm that comes out and eats the plant, destroys it. And the way Martin Luther describes it, he says the worm, who is Christ, destroys Judaism, which is represented by the plant. God appoints the worm to smite the plant. This signifies Christ appeared with his gospel at a time when the Jews vaunted most vigorously that they alone were God's people. So you can see right away that according to Martin Luther, Jesus was definitely coming to supersessionism, this kind of thought. And yeah, I got a little distracted because JMD asks, what's the working definition of religion? And we'll get to that. He definitely, because that's super important, right? Religion is not something we can just take for granted. But you'll see this next quote, Ernest Renan, who I can't remember what time period he's from, but one idea, at least, which Jesus brought from Jerusalem, which henceforth appears rooted in his mind, was that there was no union possible between him and the ancient Jewish religion. So this guy is clearly saying, completely separate. And then last we have N.T. Wright, who is a very popular New Testament study today, but even he kind of falls prey to this sort of, thinking. And Ray in the chat mentioned Martin Luther sounds anti-Semitic. Exactly. That's basically what we're getting at, is that this is a very problematic thought process to kind of think this way. But N.T. Wright says, Jesus implicitly and explicitly attacked what had become the standard symbols of the Second Temple Jewish worldview. He saw them not as bad in themselves, but out of date. So even N.T. Wright, who's somebody who really wants to kind of recapture this whole strong view of Second Temple Judaism and its impact on the New Testament, but even he is saying that Jesus is blatantly going against the rituals and whatnot, and we'll see going forward if that's necessarily the case. But then he Thiessen quotes a few Jewish scholars, and I listed them here, who he kind of cites in his paper, and they have all worked to put Jesus within Judaism, not against it. And Thiessen uses a lot of their work in this essay and his book. But and Ray's saying Jesus was a Jew. Exactly. That's what we're getting at here. That we want to keep Jesus in his cultural context, which clearly is Second Temple Judaism. So before we actually get into the meat of the article, and this is where John's question about what kind of definition of religion are we working at. But first we run into the problem of identifying what Jesus' actual plans and intentions were, since we have no unmediated access to Jesus. So this is something I knew going into this, but just reading this article just put it into words, and we have to think that we do not have Jesus didn't write anything down. We don't have a video recording of anything he did or said. We have the Gospels. And what are the Gospels? Well, they're later writings from people who didn't know Jesus. And, so we don't have unmediated access to Jesus. We get it through these people who were kind of at their whim what they choose to write, and the way they choose to portray these different stories. So not to say, and this is where he gets into like some pretty technical stuff about a criterion of multiple attestations. So when we see some of the same stories repeated throughout the Gospels, we can have more confidence that these are linked closer to the historical Jesus, basically. But that kind of criterion is coming under fire because we're realizing more and more that the Gospels are working off of each other. Like Mark is first, and Luke and Matthew both are copying off Mark, and now we're seeing that Luke is copying off Matthew, or if you believe in Q. But either way, we don't necessarily have. They're not three independent sources for sure, no matter what you hold to as far as Q and whatnot. But we don't need to get into super technical weeds of all that kind of synoptic problem stuff. But just to remember that what we're working with is mediated through the gospel authors. It's not Jesus's plain words. So we just have to think about that and really analyze each story or each passage, on its own merit and like what's it got going for it. Is it reasonable to think this is linked to the historical Jesus, or how do we think about these things? But we'll get into that as we go forward. And then second is, what exactly is religion? And did Jesus, like another question that might come in your head when you first see the title, did Jesus intend to reject Judaism and start Christianity? And that's kind of an anachronistic question. It really doesn't touch on the categories of the time. So the main focus of this article is on the rituals and things along those lines related to Judaism. So the ceremonial practices and the ritual impurities and the temple and the sacred times and festivals and things along those lines, like the rituals and how serious people at the time took them. Did Jesus go along with that? Did he take them just as serious or more serious or less serious? So that's what we're getting at, really, like the rituals and customs and things on the cultic activities, I guess is a good word for it too. So, and then, so to kind of take these two caveats into mind, Thiessen lays out like sort of a less catchy title for sure, but a more accurate title that he could have gave the paper. So, according to the synoptic gospel writers, did Jesus plan to change the various ceremonies related to the cult of the Jewish God? So that's really the question we're getting at. It takes into account, we're relying on, according to the synoptic gospel writers, that kind of takes into account this fact that we don't have unmediated access to Jesus' words. And then the ceremonies related to the cult of the Jewish God, that kind of gives a definition of what he really means by religion. So with those caveats kind of in mind, he breaks it into three sections of the meat of it here. So as far as the temple, which is the first section, how did Jesus understand the temple, and did it go against Second Temple Judaism or go along with basically the same way they sort of thought? So Simon Joseph argues that Jesus aimed to change the Mosaic customs of the Jews by rejecting the violent blood sacrifice inherent in the temple cult. So, so this guy's arguing that Jesus was against this whole violent sacrifice system, but is that really true? And I think we can start out by, right from the birth narrative of Jesus, we see that his family behaving as though the temple is truly sacred space. They take him there on the 8th day to be circumcised. And you'll see in Luke's gospel, the adolescent Jesus believes that the temple is the earthly dwelling of the Jewish God. So, that story where he is a teenager or a young kid and spends a day in the temple and gets lost, and his parents come and find him, and he's there and says, I'm in the house of my father. He really treats the temple like it's God's house. And that's along the same lines as what the Jews at the time thought. And then Matthew's gospel also depicts Jesus as believing the Jewish temple is where sacred oaths and sacrifices are made. So we never see him, going against this idea at all. So as far as the temple goes, yes, I think it's pretty clear throughout all three synoptic gospels that Jesus clearly understood the temple in a very similar or exactly the same way that most Jews at the time would have understood it. So, and then this ritual impurity section, and this was a really, really good section because it hits on a lot. Basically, this is like most of what Thiessen's book, Jesus and the Force of Death, talks about this whole ritual impurity system. So, I got a lot out of this section because I had been reading the book, and this is a lot of the same stuff. So, three main sources of ritual impurity that he wants to talk about in this paper: lepra, genital discharges of blood and semen, and corpses are the three sources of ritual impurity. So in Mark 1:40 through 44, which I planned on wanted to have my Bible so I could read out some of these passages to kind of make a little more sense. Dun, dun, dun. And a leper came to him, imploring him, and kneeling, said to him, "If you will, you can make me clean." Moved with pity, he stretched out his hand and touched him and said, "I will, be clean." And immediately the leprosy left him, and he was made clean. And Jesus sternly charged him and sent him away at once. So this is like a really interesting passage. Now I'm remembering that Thiessen talks a lot about in his book. And I'll let you, if you want to get into the meat of it, definitely recommend reading his book. But the main point of it is that Jesus, when he sees this man with leprosy, and I don't want to get too much in the details, but leprosy is not what I had always come to think of as this, like, skin disease with like boils and that's super contagious and all that. It's strictly a ritual impurity thing. More than likely, leprosy referred more to like eczema, basically dry skin. It really wasn't like some disgusting, serious disease, but the Jews at the time thought of it as relating to death and being sort of like a demonic, deathly sort of thing. I don't know if demonic, I shouldn't have said that word, but more of like an outside force, that kind of takes over someone and makes you ritually impure. So it's very serious as far as the ritual, but not as serious as you would think, like leprosy of today that we see like in third world countries, that's like very, very serious medical condition. That's not what this was. So when Jesus heals this man, he doesn't tell the guy, "You're fine, this is nothing, like you just have dry skin." He understands that this is a serious ritual impurity, that this man needs help, and Jesus helps him and heals him and takes away the ritual impurity. So not only does this like show that Jesus takes these things seriously, but it also just says a lot about who Jesus is and that he has power over these things. And I see Eddie in the chat with Brew Facts Podcast. He's like, "Oh man, you should let me come in." Yeah, I just wanted to knock this out fairly quick, but we'll see how quick it goes. But I've been wanting to just post this for a while. What are ADHD? I need to stop. So next we have another passage from Mark 5:25 through 34. And let me see if I can pull that up really quick. "And there was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years, who had suffered much under many physicians, and had spent all that she had, and was no better, rather she grew worse." So this is a long passage, but but this is all about a genital discharge. So that's what we're getting to, these three things. And it's very similar in this story. Jesus takes these things seriously, but it's not like not that Jesus is so concerned with like just the woman dying or anything. It's not necessarily he's so concerned with her health. It's clear that he's concerned with the ritual impurity and wants to take that away. And it's clear that he has power over these things. And it just really shows like his connection to, Yahweh in the Old Testament and this whole like Jewish system. I think it's really important to understand. But what we're really getting at here is that Jesus is not, contradicting these things or saying, yeah, they don't matter. That's the old way or anything like that. And and then Jesus 5:35 we see, or Mark, Jesus. Mark 5:35 through 43. This is another example that's very, very similar, but in this one he encounters a corpse. And I just wanted to really hit home this whole leprosy thing, but I touched on that a lot up here. I just didn't want to forget. That's why I had that last point. So, in summary, Jesus at no point in any of these incidents tells the people not to worry about the impurity, yet he cures them of it, and many times tells them to still follow through with the required rituals. Yeah, that's something I kind of left off, is after Jesus, like in the first one, in Mark 1, he heals the man and then tells him, go to the temple and follows through with the temple rituals. So, still go and do all these things and talk to the priest and all these things that he needs to do. But yeah, so it's like Jesus takes the temple rituals very seriously. And then last, we kind of have the sacred time. And this one, so the gospel narrative implies strongly that Jesus regularly observed the sacred times and festivals. And we see that throughout all three of the synoptics, and it's not as much as I kind of thought. Like, some people do have objections and say, one objection that people may bring up is that we don't read anything about Jesus's observance of the Passover until right before the crucifixion. So, throughout his ministry, we don't hear about it until right before the crucifixion. And then, we have sort of the Last Supper and all that stuff and his betrayal. But the point that Thiessen makes in the paper is, while the silence of this fact to the original readers, wouldn't have been too much of note, but if Jesus didn't observe the Passover and all these other sacred festivals, that would have been something that they wrote. So it is sort of an argument from silence, but that's not like where he's making his point. But it's just to say that if you're going to try and make this point that, we don't see him celebrating the Passover, it doesn't go... You kind of have to refute the other points about, how serious he takes the temple and how serious he takes the ritual impurity. And it doesn't make sense if he's taking those things seriously for him not to celebrate the sacred time. And then when he does celebrate the Passover, it's like, go do all these things to prepare for the Passover, he tells his disciples. And they're not like, what? We haven't done this for the past 3 years or whatever. Why are we doing it now? You don't see anything like that. It's just, okay, So it kind of takes I think the best way to understand it is that the Gospels basically take for granted that Jesus is following through with these sacred times. And then the last point about the sacred times is the whole amount of times that Jesus supposedly profanes the Sabbath and does work on the Sabbath. And is that really him, not caring about the Sabbath, or, is he, what's going on there? So and mainly these are examples of him healing people, and in most of them, Jesus just says something, you're healed. It's not really like he's performing surgery or anything like that. And he makes the same, and then it's not to say I'm just coming up with this, or Thiessen's just coming up with this idea. This is the same case, basically, that Jesus makes when the religious authorities want to accuse him of breaking the Sabbath. He makes sort of a legal argument to say why it was okay, or that he really wasn't doing any kind of work, So I don't think really this charge of him not caring about the Sabbath really holds much weight. So I think it's safe to say that he most definitely observe the Sabbath, observe the festivals. So really these three things, the sacred times, the ritual impurity, and the temple, those are three huge parts of the Second Temple Jewish religion. And we see Jesus really not contradicting much of the rituals and ceremonies in and of themselves. Does he go against religious authorities? Sure. Right? That's what we see. We see him really people who distort these things and turn them into something they weren't supposed to be. But the rituals in and of themselves, we don't see Jesus really having an issue with them at all. And if anything, he takes them extremely seriously. So this quote from Paula Friedrichsen in the conclusion, she says, on the evidence of Paul's letters, the Gospels, and Acts, Jesus chose to live in Jerusalem, worship in the temple, and keep the festivals, the Sabbath, and the food laws. So she's all on board with this. And Paula Friedrichsen is a really great Jewish scholar that I mentioned. And then Thiessen, in his very conclusion, says... he uses the term, he calls Jesus even, I'm not even going to say it because I can't say it, right? I can read it, halak, Jesus, yeah, but I can't say it, but, a Jesus concerned to keep the law properly and to make legal arguments for why he keeps it in the way that he does. Whatever the precise difference between the history and the narratives of the Gospels with regard to details about deeds and saying, the historical conclusion can only be that the Jesus of the Gospels exists only because the historical Jesus himself was law observant. Did Jesus plan to start a new religion? No. So I think Thiessen makes a really strong case that while Jesus had some serious issues with some of the practices that were going on in Second Temple Judaism, Jesus did not have issues with Second Temple Judaism in and of itself. And I think that really... he does a really good job. I really recommend reading this article. I have a link. I'll put a link to the article in the description. And I definitely, if you want to really look into this farther, I recommend reading Thiessen's book, Jesus and the Forces of Death. This background I got here, and you'll see the picture on the thumbnail of this video is from the cover of his book. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to run through this article real quick. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I'll address any questions I get in the comments for sure. And yeah, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. I'm really excited for the upcoming interviews I got. I have even more in the works than the ones that are nailed down. And check out my interview from the other day on Monday, and all my past ones. I had Randall Rouser on, I've had Dustin Crummett, Stephen Nemesh, Liz Jackson. I've had a lot of interviews, and I've gotten a lot of new subscribers. So if you haven't checked them out, there's some really good ones. So please do. I really appreciate it. And like I said, on any of the videos, you leave a question, I'll do my best to get back to you. But yeah, with that, I'm just gonna end it here. But I really appreciate everybody for watching. And yeah, thank you so much.